Good morning, everybody. So, I got my kids out here. They're gonna help me out. Liam, say hi.
Hi.
Camden, say hi.
Hi.
So what we're gonna be doing is working on this '03 Nissan Sentra. And I noticed it when my boy was driving the car. He pulled in and I could see a little bit of wobble on this right front wheel. So
Yeah.
I ended up looking at it and ended up being a tie rod end. So right here, he's jacking up the car right now. And I actually have a little bit of movement and the tie rods are gone. So we're gonna be replacing it today. Sorry about that noise. But we got all the replacement parts. We ordered them off Amazon. Gotta love Amazon. So I got that, and then I got some steering stabilizer end links. So I'm gonna replace those, and hopefully that's all that it is. So once I pinpoint the tie rods are good to go, we'll get those on. And then if I have to, we'll end up doing some wheel bearings, which I really don't want to. Just replace the whole hub, but we'll see what happens. So we're gonna finish getting this jacked up and get the tire off. We're gonna replace the tie rod ends because I know those are bad, those are shot. How you check that is I started up the car. I didn't have it jacked up. I had my boy just shake the steering wheel back and forth, and I could see that the outer and inner tie rods are loose. So that's an easy way to check. Another way is, yeah, you can jack it up. You can place your hand on both sides of the tire, on that side and on that side, and shake it back and forth, and you'll be able to see if there's any movement in the tie rod that way. But we already know those are shot. We already have the parts for those, so we're gonna go ahead and get replacing those. So we'll get to it. All right, so now that we got it jacked up, I ended up putting a spare tire underneath the front of the subframe, so that way, if anything does happen with this little bottle jack, I have extra security, so that way the car does not fall. So if you don't have a jack stand, use a spare tire, it'll help out. But we're gonna take this wheel off.
One, two.
And these lug nuts are not the greatest.
No. It's all rusted.
So they do have some burrs on them because it looks like somebody tried using the wrong size of bolt. But we managed to get them off.
So then now we can just slide it off.
Yep. All right, bud, do you want to set that right against that door? All right, so this is a better view. So right here is your outer tie rod. This right here is your inner tie rod. And if it's stock, it does not have any type of, like this one has like a flat surface, so that way you can put a wrench on it. This one did not. So what I ended up doing was grabbing a pipe wrench, and I put the pipe wrench over it, and then I just pulled really hard and it finally broke loose. You can see it's loose. So now that I got the inner tie rod loose, what I'll do is I'll end up taking off this little cotter pin and take this bolt off.
I can't pop.
So that cotter pin slides out, and then I'll find the right socket to fit on this. All right, so 19 millimeter is gonna be the nut that we're gonna need. What we'll end up doing is grabbing a hammer, just tapping the side of this knuckle, and it should pop the tie rod out. So now, once you got that outer one out, we can go ahead and finish unscrewing the inner. And there we go. And this is what I was talking about. It's just a smooth surface. There's no spot to put a wrench on it, so you have to use a pipe wrench. And let me grab the new one. And here's the new one. So as you can see, it's got a spot where you can actually fit a wrench, crescent wrench, whatever you want on there to tighten it up. It is measuring, so I'll take the old one with the new one, and then what I'm going to do is end up putting the outer tie rod on with the new inner. Alright, so here is the outer tie rod, and I got some that I was able to get a grease zerk and manually grease them up so that way they'll last longer. The ones that are just completely sealed, they tend not to last as long. So if you got the option to buy a tie rod in that has a grease zerk fitting, do it. So just screw it on there like that, and then every oil change, if you really wanted to, you could put a pump of grease through it just to keep it lubed up. So the inner is completely screwed on. I haven't tightened it up yet. I will in just a second. So now I'm gonna fit this outer right on. I'm gonna zip this nut back on. I'll slide that in. Now once it's slid in, bend the cotter pin, and now you don't have to worry about that nut making its way back out. So now what I'll do is I'll get a wrench on the inner tie rod. So there's the look at the new outer, new nut, new cotter pin. Alright, so on this side, this is the driver's side, there is a metal clamp that holds on the boot, and it literally goes clear back there onto the rack and pinion, right? So when you get back up in there, you can see, you'll be able to see that little tiny tab. It's not going to focus in, but I already got it off. And what you'll end up doing is grabbing just a little screwdriver, putting it in there and prying up, and it'll knock this little band loose. And this band is what holds the actual boot on to cover up the inner tie rod so it doesn't get any water, dust, or anything into it and cause more damage. And then there is a little bracket right here that you'll need to take off so you can slide this boot all the way back. Then you got access to the inner tie rod, and you can reuse this boot as long as it's good. So the inner one does not have any clamps, so I'll be using zip tie. All right, so with the pipe wrench, I was able to get that inner tie rod nut loose. Now I'm going to take off this cotter pin. This one is in bad shape. Comes with the new one, so I might just have to break it off with the gun. All right, and sometimes these the outer tie rod will get stuck, meaning the bolt will get stuck and the stud will start spinning. So just grab some channel locks if you got some, grip it on, and start unbolting it. And I'll continue to get this off. Alright, so now in order to get this boot off, this end is not going to slide over that right there. So we need to disconnect the outer tie rod from the inner. But before I do that, I'm going to measure up. I already pre-assembled the new outer and inner. Let's see, we got, it's pretty close to matching up. See where we're at right here. I'd say that is pretty close. Alright, so now that we got our length, once we slide this off, we're gonna have to take this nut off as well, because that little piece isn't gonna slide over that. So good rule of thumb, I mean, you can always measure it. So measure from the outside of this tie rod, the outer, to the outside of this inner, get your length. Alright, so now that we got the boot off, we're gonna end up sliding it over the new inner tie rod. And you can slide it all the way through. It's not gonna hurt anything. And then make sure you grab the clip and move that clip in. And what I ended up doing was grabbing my thumb and kind of eyeballed where that nut would go. And you can put on your outer tie rod. Okay, so there's the assembly right there. And I'm gonna keep this loose. So what happens is there's a ring on the inside of this boot and it actually clips right in. It'll clip into this little ring right here and keep it on. So I'm gonna keep that out of there so that way I can get to the inner tie rod. So now I'm just gonna install it just like the other side and that'll be it. Alright, so this is the inner tie rod, and you can see I did put a zip tie, and it'll hold because on the inside of the boot there's a little ring, and then there's also a ring that's on the rack and pinion, and they actually go into each other, and all they need is just a little bit of pressure to keep them together, and that zip tie will work perfect. And then what I did right here is you got the outside of the boot, and there is another ring, like I told you, that's embedded into the inner tie rod bar, and then there's a ring on the inside of the boot, and they go into each other, and they just need a little bit of pressure. So I reused that ring, and now we're good to go. We got our boot on there, it's secure. Got the outer tie rod on. We got the cotter pin through the castle nut, and then what I'll do is put a little bit of grease into it, and we'll be good to go. Alright guys, well that's how you do inner and outer tie rods on an 03 Nissan Sentra. I didn't get to the sway bar links yet. I'll do those a little bit later. I think I got a little bit more work to do on this. So if I end up changing out a hub, bearing, I'll be sure to get that on video on a how-to. So thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it, and have a good day.